Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert, back at it.
Finally back at it. Whew. That was a long lap around the block we took.
Yes.
I feel winded. How about you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it was really a lap around the state of Nevada.
It was a serious lap around the state of Nevada.
Yeah, like I didn't really even think about it that way when we started off, but once I plotted it all out on Google Maps.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, no, we basically just did the 12 Western states without really touching Nevada, with the exception of Burning Man.
Well, except for, starting there.
Yeah.
Except for the beginning.
Yeah. But it was just a quick, in and out.
Yeah, absolutely. But we, for folks who are wondering what the heck we're talking about, we recently took a 5-week tour in our RV. Of basically, like Adam said, of the 12 Western minus Nevada, and we didn't quite make Colorado.
Or New Mexico.
So
I don't know. Some amount of the Western states.
The 9 Western.
Yeah. Well, so we left from here. We went to Burning Man.
Right.
And we left Burning Man and went up through Mount Shasta in Northern California into Oregon, up to Bend, Oregon, over to Coeur d'Alene. Well, so we drove through the corner of Washington, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Whitefish, Montana.
Right.
And then we did our retreat.
Yes.
And then we were southbound and down. Through Big Sky into
Yellowstone.
Yosemite. Yeah, the other Y one.
Wyoming.
Yellowstone. Yep. And then into Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and down into...
When you said the other Y, I was like, Wyoming.
Nope.
That's not quite what you meant. You meant Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So then through the windy parts of Wyoming and then down into Salt Lake City and Moab and Zion and Prescott, Arizona and Lake Havasu, California, and then Joshua Tree and then LA.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew, see, it was a long lap.
It was a long ways. Yeah. I think it was just under 4,000 miles.
Yeah. And it was pretty cool. For folks who maybe don't know the backstory, we bought our RV last year for Burning Man, and it's a 32-foot Southwind. And it's, right?
Yeah.
I know that because Adam has more conversations at gas stations than ever before because people want to talk about RVs.
Yeah.
They want to know what it
starters.
is, how much gas mileage it gets, all of the things. They want to know. And it's quite the conversation starter. I've never heard Adam chatting with so many people than whilst filling up the gas tank.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like a 70-gallon tank, right? So you're there for a while.
Yeah.
And you take up most of the space and people are like, nice rig. Yeah. What's that? Ooh, yeah, look at that. And they always want to talk about it, which is cool. I mean, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's super fun. RV life is a whole nother world, but we actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Turns out we're RVers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once we got home, we were like,
happy to be home too. Oh my gosh. Well, I was pretty nervous because, after being on the move, you kind of grow, I don't know if it's addicted or attached or it just normalizes that you're kind of on the move.
Yeah.
And I think especially for a wandering soul like myself, I like the fact that we could be on the move, yet I still had all the creature comforts and the feeling of home.
Yeah.
We had our dogs with us, so you still feel like you're home even though you're on the move. So it was kind of the perfect blend for me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then we got home and it was like,
we're home.
Oh,
this place is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Our studio. If you want to make a studio very large, live in an RV for a while. And it seems humongous.
Yeah. All this space. What are we going to do?
What did you say that you were at the oven and you turned around and you got vertigo?
Totally. The kitchen is so big. I'm like, whoa, what's all this? The sink is way over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of a trip. I mean, I adjusted quickly, but
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, we do apologize for being gone, for taking a break, but we really needed to make that lap. And, we really just needed a little time out.
Yeah.
It's been a long 5 years of podcasting straight.
Yeah.
And so we just, had a little breaky poo.
Sometimes you need to take a break.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And if you want to take a break, we have some awesome opportunities in which you can do so.
Yeah.
First off, we've got Peru coming up in like 7 months, 6 months, 7 months.
Dude, it's right around the corner.
Yeah, well,
right?
I know.
It's the end of March.
It creeps right up on you, right?
Yeah.
So we did have 2 offerings for Peru. One was the Salcantay trek, which we've done the last couple years. That is officially sold out. So our Lares portion of the trek, which Adam and I will be leading this year, still has some availability. And that, folks, it's a really, really special trip. We were, again, super skeptical after doing the Salcantay, wondering if, anything could compare. Yeah. And it was really, really special and spectacular and really just captured the heart and soul of Peru and was, instantly 2 thumbs up for us. And
a thumbs up. It was instantly a thumbs up.
It was a thumb up.
Instant thumb.
It was just instantly like a no-brainer for us. And, Adam and I always talk about having this feeling of like, yes, this is a Be the Wellness retreat, or this is an experience that we can get behind. And this particular trip absolutely was. And don't get it twisted. There's plenty of room to get in killer hikes, if you so please. There's awesome, beautiful hikes in which we participated while we were on that trip. But you also have an opportunity to do some cultural activities. You get to see where, maybe you go to a factory where they're making the alpaca thread for the materials, and you see them weave it, and you see them make the dyes. And then, we did a ceremony one day with some local, you wouldn't call them tribeswomen, but like some
village people.
Some of the village people, yeah, because this is the cool thing about this particular trek is that you're actually going through the villages in Peru. You're walking through farmlands and really the native areas. Yeah. And the company that we work with has special access really to these like back road kind of areas.
Yeah, it's private land.
It's private land.
It's people's farms and whatnot, that we hike through.
So you're really getting these like spectacular experiences of the real heart and soul of Peru. And it's really magical stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things. I mean, I think we topped out because we opted to do the hikiest hikes, right? Because we just really wanted to get a feel for what it was all
how
about.
Hard they were.
And I think we topped out at like 14,600, something like that, up in the lakes, and it's like it's there. You know what I mean? So this isn't this isn't just a ride around and look at things.
This isn't just a ride your pony.
Certainly not a ride your pony.
Although there is a pony.
There is a pony. But what's just really awesome about it is that you can really get in where you fit in, and you can do hikes down, It's like we'll pick you up here and we're going to drive down to this point and we're going to hike this piece and then we're going to take you into town. I mean, it's a really cool way to explore that portion of Peru and really get to kind of choose your own adventure,
Yeah, and don't forget, you're going to end up in Machu Picchu. At the end, you end up at like the Mecca, one of the wonders of the world. I mean, and it's truly a remarkable place at the end of a journey like that to kind of bookend the experience. And it really is such a special trip. And the last time we'll be doing Peru is this year for at least a few years. We're only 2 people, so we have to cycle in different locations. And if you haven't done Peru and you haven't done it with us, I mean, we just can't endorse this experience enough. It's really going to be spectacular.
We are awesome.
We are awesome.
Take it from us.
You want to be with us. Go us.
It's true. It's
Go
true.
Peru.
Yeah. Peru really shows up.
But I mean, I'm sure you're awesome too. So it's totally like, one and the same.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we've got Peru coming up. And right after that, of course, back to back, like we did last year, we'll be doing New Zealand again, which was another spectacular trip. We did it for the first time last year. It was such a wonderful adventure. And really for someone who's looking for an adventure of adventures.
A smorgasbord.
Yeah. There's whitewater rafting, there's hiking the Tongariro Crossing, which is they say it's one of the best day hikes in the world. And
they know what they're talking about.
They do know what they're talking about. But it really is spectacular. Having hiked a lot of pretty amazing hikes in our hiking careers, it's a really special hike. It's very different than anything I've ever done, and goes through all these different ecosystems, and you're hiking through Mordor, which is like, from Lord of the Rings. It's just a really cool hike. And, you're whitewater rafting, we do some awesome underground cave
Blackwater
rafting, which is really cool. Won't ruin that one exactly for you because it's pretty special. And
jet boats, freaking rafting over a waterfall.
Yes, and
like a
hiking
legit
through
waterfall.
warm thermal waterfalls, and it's just. Every day is chock full. And I think one of our clients said, "I don't think New Zealanders did as much as we did."
Yeah, totally.
Your average New Zealander probably hasn't done as much as we did in 10 days. So it really is for the adventurous person who wants to be on their toes and wants to really get the full dive of New Zealand.
Yeah. But there's also wine tasting and fly fishing and you know
downtime.
what I mean? It's a Be the Wellness deal for sure.
It's the full deal. But, it's definitely for those who want to have fun. The end.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's move on, because this was a lengthy intro, but we kind of had to catch up with you guys. We've been gone, and it's like, reacquainted lovers. We needed to get warmed up. So anyhow, Adam's looking at me like, all right, get on with it.
How is this going to end?
How is it going to end? We are talking to the amazing Julia Plevin today. And Julia has a really cool story, but most importantly, we'll let her tell that story. We're not going to tell you that story. But most importantly, she was called to write this really cool book, The Healing Magic of Forest Bathing. And it really is a look at how plants, trees, the forest, nature in general can be so supportive and so healing to us as humans, and how much we truly long for that connection, and how much our lives can be affected, how we personally can see change, not only internally, but externally on what's happening around us when we really embrace getting back to nature.
Yeah.
And so this is a really cool book. I highly recommend it. I picked it up. It basically summoned me from across the room at a little gift shop down in Abbot Kinney in Venice, here where I live. And I just was called right to it. And as soon as I picked it up and started leafing through it, I knew that I wanted to have Julia on the podcast. So here she is.
And we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Julia.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really cool to have you. I was saying just before we went live how I was in a little shop that's right around the corner from our house here in Venice Beach. And I saw this book sitting on the shelf, and the book itself was just vibrating this energy at me. And, I kind of was drawn into it, and I see this title, The Healing Magic of Forest Bathing. And, again, just like I mentioned before we went live, there's something about just the energy of the book, the way it was just sitting on the shelf, sort of vibrating this frequency out, saying, come to me. And, it's ironic that the subject matter is really about, getting lost in the forest and sort of the summon back to nature. So I'd love to just start by hearing about what inspired you to write this book.
Yeah. Well, first it gives me tingles that you felt that energy, because that is the energy of the book. Yeah. And so how I got to writing it was, I've always loved being in nature. In high school, I even had a hiking club that I ran. I chose to go to college at Dartmouth in New England because of the outdoors club, so I've always been super avid trail runner, surfer, rock climber, all of that. But it wasn't until I was living in New York City going to design school that I started to understand the mental health effects of being disconnected from nature. And like, it started to, at first it was just like an academic pursuit. And then I started to see it in myself. And so my graduate thesis became all about, it's called psychoterratica, which is the mental health effects of being disconnected from nature. And no matter what I read, like all of the ways to heal it was to reconnect to nature. So I began asking this question, what does it mean to reconnect to nature? And I graduated in 2015. I moved back to California. I was like, I can't handle New York City.
Yeah, it's pretty intense, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's like ways that you can make it work there, but I was like, I need a bit more.
Right.
And then, so I was looking for design jobs. I had student loans, but I was continuing to work on my thesis. So I started something called the Forest Bathing Club. Back before forest bathing was really a buzzword, I'd heard of it from the research I had done. And I started on meetup.com. Didn't really think that much of it. People started to sign up. A friend was like, you really have to host a meetup. And I was like, okay, you're right. So I hosted one. And that first one, a reporter from Business Insider came to. Oh,
wow.
And that's that's when I kind of began to be like, oh, okay, something bigger is happening here. Like this is beyond me. And then, next thing I know, a reporter from Quartz was covering it. And I started to get all of these inquiries, including a few months later, an email in my inbox asking me if I wanted to write a book on forest bathing.
Wow. Talk about just like, I don't know, just calling it in.
Yeah. And I really believe that at this moment, at this time, the earth, and especially the trees have, they're calling out to us, and they really have so much to share. And for people who are willing to listen and then willing to, act on behalf, like there's just magic. This is part of the healing magic. There's just things that start to happen that I'm like, if you were to ask me how to get a book deal, I'd say I have no idea.
Right. Well, and the fact that it ended up at our little local bookshop here on Abbot Kinney at this place called Burrow speaks to kind of the level that it's hitting at, because that's like, I don't want to say like it's a very she spot, but it's like, it's
not Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. It's a very specialty kind of store. And so like, it's interesting to find it there, because obviously like, someone must have thought this book was interesting and specific and like, I don't know, almost niche enough to sit on the shelves amongst these other like really interesting and sort of just like not your run of the mill sort of books and items. And so like, I don't know if I'm stumbling over that, but basically it just speaks to, what the energy around this book, who it's connecting with for sure.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And that's, I'd say like some of that intention also was channeled into that book. So it's really, it's just amazing, the power of intention. Like even when I was working with the publisher and they wanted, we were talking about the cover, and I was like, the first cover was kind of like greenish gray and like, it fits into the nature section. And I'm like, no, this doesn't belong in the nature section.
Yeah, totally. I agreed. And I'm curious, actually, the photo on the front, where is that from?
Yeah. I think, so this is actually embarrassing. I don't totally know. All of the photos were just stock imagery.
Okay.
It looks to me like a lot like the Hoh rainforest. So that's what I've kind of told myself, because that was such an important forest, especially during the writing of this book. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. So I have so many questions about this, but I think the first thing that I want to just dive into is, what is forest bathing? Like maybe you can just kind of tell the listeners, because obviously when you hear the two words together, your mind conjures up what that means. But, the intentionality and just sort of I guess intentionality really is the best word behind this term, is really kind of what differentiates it. And so I'd love for you to just explain what that concept is.
Yeah, totally. So I think part of why forest bathing is having such a moment right now is exactly what you said, that it conjures up. Like, people just hear that and they're like, oh, I don't know what that is, but I want it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they usually ask, like, do I need a bathing suit? Are we going swimming?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then I have to explain, no, it's about bathing in the atmosphere of the forest. And it comes from the Japanese term shinrin-yoku, which literally translates as bathing in the forest atmosphere. And the term was coined in the 1980s when they did all of this scientific research in Japan to prove the benefits of going into nature as a way to lower your heart rate, your cortisol levels, your stress. There's now been so much additional research on the benefits of being in nature, you know, and one of my favorites is 1 minute of looking up at a tree will increase your sense of awe. Or just being in nature for 15 minutes gives you an immune boost that will last up to 2 weeks. And this, you know, and there's the benefits of earthing, actually having your feet on the ground, and the idea that for 99.9% of human evolution, that's how we spent our days, was walking on the earth, sleeping on the earth. And now we can go days or weeks without ever actually making contact with the surface of the earth. And then when we do, it's often in these like rubber or, you know, steel-toed shoes that we don't actually get the benefits of having our feet on the earth. And all coming at a time when we're just so disconnected, you know, and we're so spending so much time on technology, and we're more stressed and anxious than ever. So it's really like, it's a way of getting away from our screens and all of this noise, and just like the restoration of being in nature, which heals us on so many levels, down to the fact of like our eyeballs have this fractal structure. So when we're in cities or like offices and everything's square and geometric, our eyes are constantly searching for other fractal like shapes, like fractals, like that organic nature shapes. And so when we find it, then our eyes can relax.
Interesting.
So true.
Yeah, it's like unwinding so many of the things that we're like trying to solve technological problems with more technology. You know, it's like, oh, I've got night shift and I've got blue blocking glasses and I've got all these things. You're like, or you could just look at a tree for a period of time, preferably not through a window. Yeah.
Exactly. And one of my favorite things is like, that design, like we can be fascinated by looking at a fire for hours, right? Because it has this kind of like always slightly shifting, never the same, but we'll get bored like looking at a phone, which is why we now have to design, like they design all these like really addictive things, like this endless scroll, right? To keep us
entertained.
Engaged.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because it's something that we've certainly noticed and even talked about before, that sitting around a fire and staring at it, is just something that seems to happen. If there's a fire, people will go around it and they'll look at it, and for, like you're saying, sometimes for hours on end without it ever becoming, boring. You can just sit and be completely still in that space. I never thought about it from that perspective, but it's really true. It's just, ever changing and it's constant, novelty for your senses. Interesting.
Totally. And the senses is a huge part of forest bathing too, is like, the smells. So trees emit these essential oils known as phytoncides that boost your natural killer, your NK cell activity. And so like a lot of parts of being in the forest is about engaging, your sense of smell, your sense of touch, of taste, like all the five senses. And I often do this while closing my eyes because we live in such a visually dominant culture where we're so used to taking in information from our eyes that kind of like drowns out our other senses. And so when we close our eyes, we can invite our other senses to awaken. And then like once you have all of those senses engaged, you can start to tap into your deeper senses of like intuition and, and following your heart. And that's really hard to do when you're like, living in your head.
Totally. Absolutely. It's interesting. You said, that the trees are really like wanting to help us right now. They're reaching out and and I really feel that. And I think, you know, it's to me, I think it's a big reason why a lot of people are returning to plant medicines and why there's such an insurgence of people that have interest in really participating in those kind of things, because I think the plants and the trees in particular are reaching out to us. And I'm just curious if on your thoughts about that, if you have noticed that, you know, uptick of people kind of returning to plant medicines and sort of being curious about that alongside of this sort of forest bathing uptick.
Yeah, I think they definitely go together. You know, and there's even like a Mayan prophecy around cacao. Cacao comes from a tree, and it says like the resurgence of cacao will come at a time when humans and nature need to reconnect. Mm. And, you know, like cacao ceremonies even like have become quite the thing. And I know I drink, you know, cacao every morning, but there's, to me, plant medicines, you know, are so helpful and so useful and such great teachers, and like such a beautiful path. And I also think that there's you know, we are used to extracting things from nature, from the forest. Like we'll extract different plants, so, you know, that's how we make our medicines. But there's a medicine of just being in the forest, like when it's all intact. And I also know that a lot of people who have done, you know, like especially like psychedelic or like ayahuasca, this practice of forest bathing is really powerful for integrating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it makes sense. Get the whole picture.
Yeah,
it's amazing. We participate in an ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica. We did it last year and we'll do it again this year. And one of the big things that I remember one of the trees was saying is that basically they hold the space for us. You know, essentially they like are holding that container for us as humans. And you don't really think about that when you're walking around and you're just looking at trees. You're like, oh, there's a tree or whatever. But you don't realize that like the whole network of trees are holding the planet together in a sense. Like it's creating the atmosphere. It's creating like the energetic connectivity in the soil. Like it's all of these things that are really holding space for us. And so it's just interesting to think about that when you know, are just, when you look at a tree, like it's actually giving back to you in that moment. It's holding energy for you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and like there's just so much awesome around like the mycelial network of how the trees are all connected and how they're sharing messages underneath the ground. And then one of the things I love to say about trees is that they live in a constant state of meditation.
Yeah.
You know, and they're constantly receiving energy from deep inside the earth and then also from the sun and all the cosmos. And it's like and so we actually, as humans are very similar to trees, you know, we're the walking trees. And yeah, we have a lot in common, you know, like a lot more in common than we expect with trees. Like we don't think of them as like kin, but they totally are.
Totally.
And then I think what you said about, you know, ayahuasca is so like having that realization. I think plant medicine really helps us open up in those ways, to that awareness. And then I think once you are open, it's really easy forest bathing kind of reminds you of it.
Totally.
Tap back in.
Yeah. It's just kind of that intentional. And that's what I love about it is that like, you know, even if you're going for a hike or you're going into the forest or you're going, you know, intentionally to be with nature, it's a different thing when you go intentionally to like allow its energy to wash over you and to really be with it. It's like you can almost step one layer deeper into the experience of connection than even just, you know, walking through the forest or going on a hike. It's like a very intentional, you know, energy that you're giving and receiving in that moment from this idea of forest bathing.
Yeah, exactly. When I lead forest baths, I always start by having everyone share their intention. And I had, you know, we circle up and I actually have this one rattle from Guatemala that I pass around and people always think it's a microphone. Like they always try to talk into it. I'm like, it's like, it's a microphone for your intentions that we can't actually hear you, you know? But, but there is something so powerful around stating your intention. And then that's what informs the experience. And, so like nature is always healing us, whether or not we're aware of it. But the more that our minds are aware of it, like when we know, like, I love all of the science because it helps us, it kind of like lets our mind, have some food so that we can fully relax and trust in the experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a critical piece to a lot of this because there's so many people, well, myself included.
There's so many people, mostly people, one sitting in this room right now.
Two in this room, well, one in this room, who, you just need that. You need this, like, okay, this all makes sense. I like being outdoors and there's no doubt about that. And I like doing all of this, but what's really going on here, And so I think it's nice when we have some level of legitimacy isn't the right word, but like a, clinical legitimacy or whatever, something that we can understand, some science behind it that helps us understand that. And so to that point, let's talk a little bit more about the actual disorder that you said earlier. And I can't remember what the name of it is, but the disconnected from nature disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this, psychoterratica is a term coined by an Australian researcher named Glenn Albrecht. And it's actually an umbrella term, and there's many different terms underneath it, including eco-anxiety, which, we can guess what that is. And then eco-paralysis, which is like, oh my God, these issues are so immense. Like, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to do nothing and kind of shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's solastalgia, which is a loss of solace for a place that you never left as it's changed. And there's just there's just so many of these terms. And like, we need a new vocabulary for these new times of, how disconnected we are from nature. And also like this situation we're in, on the planet. And right now, in the DSM, which is like what psychiatrists use, there's only one disorder that talks about nature connection at all, and that's seasonal affective disorder.
Right.
But really, there's so many other ways that nature affects our well-being, and like this core relationship, right? The idea that, like, you'll sit on the couch and you'll talk about the relationship you have with your family or your lover. Like, do you ever talk about your relationship with the earth? And it's almost like that, like, David Foster Wallace, like, are you aware that you're in water? It's like, are you aware that you're even on this earth? Like that.
Right. So, I'm hearing this and I'm thinking about the, people like, so you grew up in California, we grew up in California, we had access to a lot of nature. We had access to a lot of trees and plant life and sort of grew up with that to the degree that when someone like you talks about this, we have an experience of knowing what you're talking about. We know it somewhere deep down inside of us, even if we haven't spent a lot of time in nature recently, we can instantly connect with what you're saying and go, oh yeah, I know, when I'm spending a lot of time in nature, or when I was a kid, or when I was outdoor more, I just felt great. But I'm wondering about the generation that is coming up now, or even, generations before that have been sort of, I guess just sequestered from nature and haven't really had that exposure at all. And I'm curious if, like, those types of people who really just haven't had that experience of connecting with nature, like what is to be done for them? They don't even have like the thread to pull from to go, oh yeah, I know that makes a difference. Like, how do you enroll people in the connection with nature when they've really never experienced it?
Yeah, that's really important. Totally. And so I actually grew up outside DC. So I've lived in California for a while.
Oh, got it.
Grew up outside DC, and my parents grew up, in Long Island, and their parents in New York. So I actually come from multiple generations of not being super connected to nature. And it was something like, as a child, I kind of was like, always was drawn to nature, but not because not because of my family, but just was like this inner, like, knowing in me. But so, people ask me, like, did you grow up? And I didn't actually grow up in the forest. And there's people who did, and probably know a lot more than I do, but for me, it's like, was the healing I needed. And so there's that, but you're totally right that, there's this, this idea of biophilia of human beings, like innately loving the earth and, our mother, like that connection that we have. But if we're not exposed to it as children, especially this idea of like nature as being this creative space or this safe space, then we grow up without having that sense. And then it becomes a lot harder to feel connected to the earth. If you have those memories as a child, like something I always invite people at getting a forest bath is to share about a time they felt connected to nature. And what's really beautiful is, no matter where you come from or how old you are, pretty much everyone has a moment when they felt connected to nature. And that just like the universality of that, like, wow, we all feel this connection to this one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious about, obviously we're specifically talking about forest bathing and being with trees, but I'm curious like what you think or just any kind of commentary you would have around that same experience, but, for people who live in the desert or for people who live at the beach, like, do you think that this forest bathing creates a really unique response and relationship that is specific to being with trees? Or do you think that people can experience that same kind of connectivity, but in the different elemental environments, so to speak?
Yeah, I love that. So everything in nature has its own healing. The desert has its healing powers, the ocean for sure, the negative ions, tree, like it's just different healing, and there's just so much of like just being outside, breathing in the air, being in your body, like so much of that is universal. Trees offer their own way of healing, but so does a cactus. So does, like it's all, it all works. And actually, the practice of forest bathing, a lot of it is, some of it's about connecting with trees and talking to trees, but a lot of it's just like, different invitations, like being in a sit spot, just sitting and observing, or finding something, with different objects that might have different messages for you, which can really be done anywhere. And then one of my favorite books it's by Mary Thompson, and it's called Reclaiming the Wild Soul, how Earth's landscapes restore us to wholeness. And she talks about how our soul is drawn to different landscapes for different reasons at different times in our life.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really cool. So it's like the idea of the forest is mystery. And if I think about like when I stepped into the forest, it was like really when I was needing to connect to the mystery of life. But then each landscape offers different things.
So what, just on that note, what is the beach and what is the desert?
That's a great question. So I'd have to look back into the book. I remember that and it's also personal on some level. Like she talks about the mountains as being when you need to like conquer something. But there's also different energies of mountains,
Totally.
I know she talks about grasslands as being about like building community.
Which totally makes sense if you think about like the heart of America as like the grasslands and, like these communities that are really about fostering, a sense of community and support for each other. So it's like you can almost see it in the actual places that these terrains exist.
Exactly. Yeah. And what she said, like deserts model simplicity and silence. The rivers and ocean reveal the power of flow. Mountains inspire our highest purpose. It's like the landscapes will inform us.
No, it's so cool. I love that because, I love trees. Like I'm a tree girl all the way, but there's literally something about being next to the ocean that is just like a non-negotiable for me. I have to be, I can be away from the ocean for a while, but I know the periods of time where I've been away from the ocean for longer than, a couple of months, my health and my mental health really starts to degrade. And made that connection for myself. And I'm like, okay, for the time being, me and, the ocean are like, we need to hang.
I feel the same way, actually. When life starts to get like really confusing and messy, that I'm always just like, go to the beach, like go to the ocean.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Totally. And we surf too. So it's like the same thing, just like get out there, let it wash away. Like just let her take it. She will, if you let her.
Totally.
Awesome. I love this. So I'm curious. So I'm thinking about the person who, doesn't have access to like a park or something in their sort of everyday scenario. And I'm wondering if like what advice you would give to that person who wants to cultivate a deeper connection with trees and with nature, but maybe doesn't have like instant access to somewhere where they can really do a deep dive every day.
Yeah, that's a good question too. So yeah, even if you're living in an urban city, most likely there's some park somewhere where you can get to, or like some corner of, a yard or something. And it doesn't take much, right? You can have like, a square foot where you have your feet on the earth, or one tree, even if it's like an urban sidewalk tree that you're just noticing, and start maybe like saying hello to every day and see if you can start developing a relationship with it. Also, having like plants inside or like on a porch. It's really just like bringing back that connection with nature on whatever level is possible. And then like being aware. So like, okay, maybe on my day to day, I can't, but maybe on the weekend I can go somewhere, or maybe one weekend a month, or maybe a couple of times a year, I'll take a bigger trip somewhere. And just starting to like orient towards that. That's one thing I always say is like, it might start with a 2-hour experience of a forest bath, but really it becomes it's like a reset of your mind. So every time you're drinking a glass of water, you're not just drinking a glass of water, you're in relationship with water, which is like, has been recycling around this planet forever. So we're always in relationship with nature. Even our technology is ultimately comes from the earth, so like our clothes, it's like training that awareness.
Right. Right. Just sort of like a remembering that all the source, it all comes from the same source, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. It's, we reference this movie a lot for one reason or another, but are you familiar with the Pixar? I think it was a Pixar movie, WALL-E, with the little trash robot.
I just made my boyfriend watch it because he hadn't seen it.
Dude, it's such a good movie, and it's so unfortunately predictive, I think, of kind of what's going on. But, you think about the people in the spaceship, the humans that are left that has escaped into the atmosphere, and they're so disconnected from everything, and they're just floating around in these little hover chairs, drinking their Slurpees and watching whatever content's like right in front of them. And it's like, that's the direction, you know what I mean? That's where you go if you lose, if you lose the ultimate connection with this planet, and the fact that we're just part of it. We're not here, we're not visiting. We're not here just to experience it. It's not like an amusement ride. This is like this is part of us, and it can be so difficult to make that connection. But I think what you're talking about and what you're offering up for folks is a really simple and approachable way to do that. And I think that's awesome, because the more people that we can get, tapped back into some piece of that, like you were saying, even if they didn't grow up going camping or fishing or whatever, where they're spending a bunch of time in the outdoors, there's something, there's something innate in each of us that is like, oh yeah, this feels good. My feet in the sand, like this is amazing, and I think it's, it's anything that we can do to reawaken that in folks and just kind of start to recultivate that relationship solid.
Yeah, totally. That's like the biggest, I think that's the way forward, is to reawaken, to come back. And then also like the healing of ourselves. Like I had this realization where it's like, if I'm drinking a green juice, but it's in a plastic bottle, like that's not actually healing me because it's not healing the earth, and I am connected to the earth,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like, just like you said, it's really just a reset of the way that you're approaching life. And maybe forest bathing is like something you can set as a focal point of like really being in that energy, but it's more about just the everyday act of being closer with nature and with the source, and really recognizing that we're part of the great big circle.
Yeah. Maybe don't fly your private jet to your custom airfield in the middle of a forest to get this done.
Yeah.
Totally.
Awesome. So this has been so cool, Julia. Where can people find more out about you, about the book, all the things?
Yeah. So forestbathing.club has a lot of information on what the club is up to, a link to the book. I mentioned before we were recording that I'm about to start a 10 area pop-up forest bath road tour. So coming to different locations all around the West Coast. And then also this is something that I've been trying to figure out for a while, is people are like, want to start their own forest bathing club in their communities. And so I'm finally starting an offering to mentor people into coming into their own deep connection with nature, and then helping birth like their nature healing offering.
Beautiful.
So that's all on the website, forestbathing.club.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. And so on the site, I just pulled it up here. You have all the destinations listed that you'll be, that you'll have your pop-ups at?
Yes.
Awesome.
And we'll be sharing more on Instagram at Forest Bathing Club.
Okay.
I'm personally at the moment having some like issues with like grappling with social media in this work.
Yeah.
I know.
Totally.
It's so unhealthy for us and so addictive, but it's also so, like, how do you get messages out otherwise?
Right.
But,
I know. It's the big conundrum. It's like this beautiful gift that we can work remotely, and you can do pop-up forest baths, right? Like you can actually do that and people will come and they know about it. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, we completely we feel you.
Yeah.
We grapple with the same stuff all the time. We are actually, I wish that we were going to be in Mount Shasta for your bath there, because Mount Shasta is magical. And
totally.
We will actually be going through Mount Shasta just a few weeks prior on our way to Montana. We'll actually be in Montana on that date. But anybody out there who can make that date, or any of these dates for that matter, I highly recommend it, because Mount Shasta is amazing.
Yeah. Wow. Talk about like power places on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like a proper portal.
Yeah. What are the people that live in the mountain? The Lemurians?
The Lemurians.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're there. Pretty sure. I haven't seen one, but you can tell.
Well, this is beautiful work that you're doing. I love it. I feel in my intuitive sense that we are going to connect with you in person to do something live. I just feel that in my gut. So I'm planting that seed now, and we'll see what comes of it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a feeling. I mean, this is totally up our alley of the things we try to incorporate in our events and retreats. And again, like I saw this book, and there's just times in my life where something has just a certain resonance to it or a certain vibration, and I don't really know why, but I just go with it. And that's what was here for me with this book, with you, with talking to you. So I have a feeling this is to be continued.
Yay. I hope so. You guys are awesome.
Oh, thank you. You too. Thank you for writing such a beautiful book. And we hope to get to connect with you soon in person, and hopefully in some beautiful enchanted forest somewhere.
Amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Julia. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's all she wrote, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed that podcast and got a little something out of it.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to get back to nature, come
Just
to Peru.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's a perfect spot to do it.
It is a perfect spot.
There are forests to bathe in.
There are forests aplenty.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys. We hope you have a beautiful week. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.